Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. After two fiery presidential debates, a much different tone tonight as the vice presidential candidates faced off for the first and only time before voters head to the polls exactly 35 days from today. We have live team coverage tonight. Jessica Hart and Jennifer Hoff are at watch parties with local Republican and Democratic voters. But we begin with a look at the big moments from the debate. Danny Spiewak joins us now with that. Danny?
Well, Julie, in the opening minutes of tonight's debate, the moderators put Walz and Vance on the spot immediately, asking them how would they handle the crisis in the Middle East following Iran's attack on Israel. Both said the U.S. should support their ally, but the discussion also turned quickly into a referendum on Donald Trump.
Steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment.
As much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line.
The topic of immigration also came up repeatedly tonight. Vance blamed the Harris administration for the border crisis, while Walz blamed Trump for using his influence to torpedo a bipartisan border deal in Congress.
You've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations.
Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this, and he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it.
Another issue that's top of mind right now for voters in many swing states is abortion. During this discussion tonight, Walz pointed to the law he signed last year in Minnesota that was passed by the DFL-led state legislature, while Vance said abortion rights should be left to the states as the Supreme Court decision allowed.
In Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care.
California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions.
The candidates were also pressed tonight on some past comments that they've made. Vance, for example, had to defend his current support for Trump, given that he once called Trump unfit for office back during the presidential election in 2016. Meanwhile, CBS asked Walz about reports this week from our partners at Minnesota Public Radio that called into question Walz's previous claims that he witnessed the Tiananmen Square democracy protests in Hong Kong in 1989.
The question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said.
This is, of course, the only vice presidential debate we'll see before Election Day, and it might be the last time we see any members of the ticket debate at all, since former President Trump has not agreed at this point to a second debate with Vice President Harris. Julie.
All right. Thank you, Danny. Tonight, we're hearing from voters watching the debate together. We start with local Democrats watching and cheering on Minnesota's governor tonight. Jennifer Hoff joins us live from St. Paul. Jennifer?
Julie, the Dual Citizen Brewery here in St. Paul packed with supporters. One of 64 DFL watch parties that happened all across the state tonight to see Walz and Vance meet for the first time in person. And a lot of the people here calling this debate a thoughtful and civil one. The two covered, of course, a variety of issues, as you heard Danny mention. The moderators, though, cutting mics for the first time early on after a contentious back and forth over Haitian migrants in Ohio. Walz eventually pointing to Minneapolis and Minnesota on several specific success stories, including increasing the housing stock, protecting women's reproductive rights, and child tax credits. As you heard Danny also mention, he did have to answer to that new reporting that contradicts Walz's claim that he was in China's Tiananmen Square. The moderators pushed on that several times. Walz admitting, of course, he misspoke about that. Now, his rivals have called him a shapeshifter and too liberal. Walz himself said tonight he talks too much sometimes and gets caught up in the rhetoric. But the people here described the two-term governor and six-term congressman as capable and said that he and Harris have a plan.
Both of them are very experienced people, and they know what they're talking about, so that's what I like to see. You know, I like to hear the facts. I don't like to, just hear, political rhetoric. I want to hear them actually talk about what they want to do, and I think they've done a very good. I think they're getting there. I think they're doing quite well.
Some have said that this was a pivotal moment for both candidates, but for Walz in particular, who really had to introduce himself to a national crowd, and there was little margin for error for him to do that, especially when he would speak on such a variety of issues, and his supporters here agreed that he did well. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Let's head over now to Jessica Hart in Mankato, where Republicans from across the state were watching closely tonight. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Julie. I'm at the Cato Ballroom in Mankato, where Trump Force 47 hosted about 75 people to watch this debate. And having it here in Mankato is very strategic on their part because of Walz's connection to the city. The people I talked with tonight were very impressed with J.D. Vance's performance. A group of young voters tell me that they were hoping to get to know the vice presidential candidate more, and they walked away tonight feeling like they do. During the first question, Vance took a moment to introduce himself to the American people and was able to weave in facts about himself throughout the debate. A concern many in the room had tonight was the economy. One woman tells me she's on Social Security and can't afford groceries, and she feels like a Harris-Walz presidency would make life for her worse. Another couple tells me they were hoping Vance would call out Walz and all the things they say weren't true, and they feel like he did that tonight.
I like that he's open about his life and how he grew up and what he's gone through and how he can relate to normal people.
Now, about an hour into this debate, they actually took a poll in this room, and it should come to you as no surprise that they all felt like J.D. Vance was winning this debate because they tell me they feel like he got his points across and he was calm while doing it. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. We turn now to our political analyst, Brian McClung, former Deputy Chief of Staff under Republican Governor Tim Pawlenty, and Mike Erlandson, the former state chair of the Minnesota DFL party. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen. Mr. Erlandson, we're going to start with you, since it was our governor on the debate stage tonight. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate his performance this evening?
Oh, I guess I give him an 8. I think what he had to do was be out there and be thoughtful and articulate on the issues, and I think he did that for almost all of the 90 minutes. I think we also witnessed what I think most Minnesotans and Americans wanted to see, which was a civil debate that was thoughtful and it was focused on the issues. And so now as the people hit the spin room, as they call it, and I think as the Democrats and Republicans gather to get out their messages and you compartmentalize this, as was done in the package earlier, Tim Walz did a really good job answering the questions that he needed to answer, backing up the person that will be on the ballot on the top, Kamala Harris, the vice president, and her policies. And so I think he had a good night for Minnesotans. Was it perfect? No. But, I think we all can be a little bit of a knucklehead from time to time.
Oh, that line is going to get played again and again, I do think. So what do you think, Brian, of the Republican side of this ticket?
Well, really, Senator Vance did a better job of explaining Donald Trump's positions than Donald Trump has. And I think you saw tonight, again, both of these candidates really introducing themselves to a national audience for the first time. And J.D. Vance, who's only been a U.S. Senator for 2 years, really using this opportunity to kind of work his biography in throughout the story. Growing up as in a family that was in poverty in Ohio, with his grandmother helping to raise him, telling that story throughout. And again, really, I think doing a nice job of kind of calmly and civilly explaining President Trump's positions, but also agreeing with Governor Walz when he could and showing sympathy and empathy. For example, when he expressed sympathy for the governor's son witnessing a shooting at that community center in St. Paul. So there were some nice moments for both candidates to have a chance to show their human side, and I think people are glad to see that.
Don't you? I mean, maybe this is just the bubble I live in. I think people are craving it, and I feel like we learned more tonight in the vice presidential debate than we did by a long shot in the presidential debate. Does this matter in the grand scheme of things?
Well, it probably doesn't matter a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but I think I would agree with you, Julie, right? Because each one of them gave thoughtful answers for the most part on almost all of the issues, right? And they spent time on that and educating Americans, as Brian said, about who they were and about the things that Americans care about. Where did they stand on pro-life or pro-choice, healthcare, immigration, the war that just started to escalate in the Middle East further today, right? And so I think this is something people are craving. you know, this is where 70% of America is. You know, they're not way to the left or way to the right, right? They're in the middle.
Yeah, it was
And
nice.
so-
It was nice to even see them at the end talking after the mics were cut. The
Right.
debate was over. What do you think? Does it matter on election day? Does this move the needle?
Well, realistically, who the vice presidential candidates are doesn't matter a lot. That's not who people are going to vote for. But I think for both candidates tonight, they were trying to, you know, show their running mates that they could stand up on that national stage and do this, and also to not have any major errors. So trying to just kind of get through it, play to a draw, and then we've got these, you know, final 5 weeks left until Election Day.
Crazy, 5 weeks. Thanks so much for your time tonight. We appreciate it. Well, the election is, as Brian said, 5 weeks away. Stick with KARE 11 in the final stretch. We will keep covering the issues and the candidates, keeping you informed before you head to the polls.